let me tell you about something that even most neuroscientists don't fully grasp yet. Something that, in my opinion, might be one of the most significant discoveries in neuroscience over the last 100 years. It all revolves around a small but mighty part of the brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Now, if you've never heard of it, don't worry, you're not alone. Most people haven't. And believe it or not, even among professional neuroscientists, it's not a region that gets a ton of attention, unless you're someone who teaches neuroanatomy, which, by the way, I do. It's very likely this part of the brain just isn't on your radar. Neurosurgeons. Sure, they know where it is. They have to. But many neuroscientists, even brilliant ones, couldn't tell you much about it. Not because they aren't smart, but because, historically, it just wasn't studied much. That changed, thanks to a colleague of mine at Stanford School of Medicine, Joe Provisi. During neurosurgery, where patients are often awake to allow real-time feedback, Joe was stimulating different brain areas to pinpoint where exactly to operate. And then he stumbled upon something fascinating. When he stimulated the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, this relatively obscure brain region, patients described a very particular sensation. One person said it felt like they were driving into a storm, but still felt capable and ready. Another said they felt like something was pressing on them, yet they could push through. Different words, same meaning. I feel challenged, but I can handle this. It was a consistent theme, not panic, not hopelessness, but a deep sense of effort and readiness, a psychological posture of tenacity. Now, that alone is pretty incredible, but here's where it gets even more interesting. Separate studies from different labs showed that this same brain area, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, actually grows in volume when people take on difficult new habits. So let's say you start learning a new skill that challenges you regularly, like practicing mindfulness, even though you hate sitting still. If you stick with it, this brain region begins to grow. People who don't push through that kind of resistance, their anterior mid-cingulate doesn't show the same growth. So, what does this mean? It means we might have found a neural hub for willpower, for grit, for that elusive mental toughness people talk about but can rarely define. This little brain area seems to act as a bridge between challenge and capability. And it's wired into all kinds of important systems like the dopamine reward circuit. It's not working alone. It's part of a much bigger conversation inside your head. And here's where things really start to connect. This same brain region, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, is preserved in people known as superagers. These are individuals who maintain sharp cognition well into their later years. They don't show the typical cognitive decline we expect with aging. It's not that they're just lucky. Their brains are doing something different. So maybe you're thinking, okay, that's cool science, but what does it mean for me? Well, let me put it this way. If you want to strengthen your willpower, increase your tenacity, or even give your brain a fighting chance at long-term health, the path might be through the deliberate choice to do hard things. Not just hard things you enjoy, like a tough workout if you're into fitness, but hard things you resist. That's where the transformation happens. Let's say you hate meditating, but you commit to doing 5 minutes every morning anyway. Boom! You're activating the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. You're engaging the part of your brain that says, this is hard, I don't want to, but I can do it anyway. That's the sweet spot. And the reason I'm talking about this now rather than in a video specifically about building willpower or pushing your limits is because I think this topic reaches way deeper than that. We're at a point in human history where our differences, social, political, ideological, are creating division at scale. If there's a path forward, it might not just be about being right or winning the argument. It might be about building the cognitive muscle to sit in discomfort, to feel the internal tension of opposing ideas and not run away from them. Imagine what could happen if more people developed the ability to stay open-minded even in disagreement, to stay present when everything in them wants to shut down or lash out. That's a real kind of strength, and it starts with the same part of the brain we've been talking about. So, in a strange but meaningful way, learning how to sit in cold water or how to meditate when you don't want to is training your brain to deal with life's bigger challenges like conflict, grief, change, and ambiguity. And that brings us to a tool I talk about a lot, cold exposure. But here's the twist. It's not about the cold itself. It's about what the cold represents. It's a stand-in for resistance and how we deal with it. More on that in part 2. Let's get into cold exposure, and not in a gimmicky biohacker kind of way. I'm talking about what it actually does to your brain and how it connects directly to the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, that brain region we just unpacked. You see, most people ask me, how cold should the cold plunge be, or how long should I stay in? And honestly, those aren't the right questions. The more powerful question is, how badly do I not want to do this right now? That's the gold standard. Here's how I approach it before you get into the cold plunge or shower. Take a second and rate your resistance on a scale of 1 to 10. If you're at a 5 or higher, that's your cue. That's your wall. You're already facing down discomfort, and the moment you make the choice to move through it, you're literally training your brain to be more resilient. The first wall hits you right before you step in. That moment when your mind screams, nope, not today. That's adrenaline. That's resistance. That's the first wave of discomfort. Then you get in, and maybe after 5 or 10 seconds, another wave hits you. Get out. This is horrible. That's your second wall. Every wall is just a spike of adrenaline moving through your system. And every time you stay calm and keep going, you're not just toughing it out. You're learning to navigate adrenaline with awareness, something that applies far beyond the ice bath. You start to recognize the shape of stress. You begin to understand that hard conversations, public speaking, making a big life decision, these all feel like adrenaline walls. And now you've trained your nervous system to handle them. Let me give you a real-world example. Just the other day, I had a really tough conversation first thing in the morning, a serious misunderstanding. Emotions were rising, voices were escalating, and in the middle of that moment, I remember thinking, this is just like the cold plunge. This is a wall. So I said it out loud. I literally said, I feel like there's a wall of adrenaline hitting us right now. And it broke the tension. We both laughed a little, the energy shifted, and we were able to have a real conversation again. That's the power of recognizing your body's signals. It's not about never feeling stress. It's about learning what stress feels like and not letting it hijack you. And this brings me to something really important. Your nervous system loves predictability, not comfort, predictability. Even if what you're doing is hard, if you do it consistently, your body starts to adapt. Your brain builds the pathways. Your nervous system says, okay, I know what this is now. That's why routines matter. That's why cold exposure can be transformative, not because it's trendy or macho, but because it teaches your system how to stay regulated during intensity. And this same principle applies to nearly every tool I talk about in neuroscience. Whether it's viewing sunlight in the morning, walking after a meal, eating at consistent times, or practicing deep breathing, the goal is always the same anchor: your physiology in something predictable. Let's talk about that morning sunlight thing for a second. When you get light in your eyes early in the day, not through a window but actual outdoor light, you're triggering a cascade of changes. Your cortisol rises in a healthy way. Your melatonin cycle gets set up for better sleep that night. Your mood stabilizes. You feel more awake. And most importantly, your body knows what to expect next. That sense of predictability gives you mental space because now your system isn't scanning for threats or chaos. It's grounded. Same goes for food timing. You don't need to be militant, but if you eat around the same time each day, your body starts to prepare for digestion. Hunger hormones get released at the right time. Blood sugar stays more stable. Again, it's not about perfection. It's about consistency. Now, here's the pushback I hear a lot. But Andrew, there are so many protocols. How could anyone possibly do all of this? And I get it. It can sound overwhelming. But let me be clear. These aren't rules. They're options. It's a buffet of tools. You pick what fits your life. Maybe it's morning sunlight and a walk. Maybe it's 2 minutes of breathing before bed. Maybe it's skipping the cold plunge, but committing to one tough task every day that your mind resists. The idea isn't to build your life around protocols. It's to weave these tools into the life you already have. You're not trying to become a perfect biohacking monk. You're just trying to feel more energized, more resilient, and more in control of your inner world. Because the truth is, most people are running on low bandwidth. They're tired, distracted, reactive, and a lot of that isn't their fault. It's modern life. But what if you could buy yourself a little more mental clarity every day, a little more fuel for your creativity, your relationships, your goals? That's what these tools are really about. You do a few small things consistently and suddenly you've got more energy for the big things, whether that's writing your book, launching a niche business, being present with your kids, or just feeling like yourself again. In Part 3, we're going to dive into one of the most underrated yet powerful tools out there, Yoga Nidra, also known as non-sleep deep rest, and how it can literally rewire your brain, boost your dopamine, and help you master the art of calm focus. Stay tuned. All right, now let's get into something I believe every single person should be doing, no matter your age, lifestyle, or background. It's called Yoga Nidra. Now, I know the name sounds ancient and mystical, which it kind of is, but the effects are actually deeply practical. If you've never heard of it, let me put it this way. Yoga Nidra might be the most effective tool for deep nervous system reset we currently have, period. And no, it's not about stretching or downward dogs. Think of it like meditation's deeply restorative cousin. The goal is to stay awake conscious, but guide your body into deliberate relaxation. You're not trying to fall asleep, but the brain enters states that are very close to sleep. Here's what the science says. People who regularly practice Yoga Nidra experience a 60% increase in baseline dopamine in a part of the brain called the basal ganglia, which is responsible for preparing movements, inhibiting impulsive actions, and coordinating focused effort. That's huge. We're talking about rewiring your brain to make self-control easier. And get this, Some researchers even suggest that parts of your brain may literally enter REM-like sleep states during a session. So you're awake, but your brain is getting the benefits of rest, deep neurochemical restoration, without knocking out cold like you would in bed. In other words, you're learning how to relax on command. That's a superpower. One of the reasons Yoga Nidra is so powerful is because it moves your mind from what we call thinking and doing into a state of being and feeling. Now, that might sound a little woo, but from a neuroscience perspective, it's actually a shift from external focus to internal awareness, from scanning the world outside you to tuning into what's happening inside your body. You know how your mind races when you're anxious, trying to figure out what's going to happen next or replaying things from the past. That's external monitoring. It's exhausting. But when you drop into your body, when your focus turns inward, you're no longer chasing thoughts. You're anchoring your awareness. And that does something pretty amazing. It interrupts the loop of overthinking. That's why I recommend Yoga Nidra to anyone struggling with repetitive thoughts, sleep issues, burnout, or even just lack of motivation. You can do it for 10, 20, 30 minutes. Doesn't matter. What matters is that it trains your nervous system to shift gears. And if you're wondering, yes, this is related to the NSDR or non-sleep deep rest practice that I've talked about in other videos. Yoga Nidra is the original. NSDR is just a secular, science-adapted version of the same thing. No chakras, no Sanskrit, just the core elements that allow researchers like me to study it in a lab setting. But regardless of which version you do, the impact is real. And let me say this clearly. If there's one daily habit I could recommend to the entire planet besides getting morning sunlight, it would be Yoga Nidra. Here's why. We live in a time where everyone's nervous system is fried. We're overstimulated, underrested, and stuck in fight or flight more than we realize. But Yoga Nidra helps reset that balance. It enhances what's called autonomic regulation, which means your ability to turn off stress and return to a calm, alert baseline. And that's so important because when you're stuck in a stress response, your brain literally can't access the same level of cognition or creativity. You lose access to higher level thinking. You might know what to do, but you can't reach it. Yoga Nidra helps restore that access. It's like giving your brain and body a software update. You come out of it feeling calm, focused, and recharged without needing a nap or a cup of coffee. And for many people, it even improves their ability to fall asleep later that night, or get back to sleep if they wake up at 3 a.m. with their mind racing. So again, this isn't about being productive in the hustle culture sense. It's about restoring the baseline of mental and physical vitality that lets you live your life with more energy, presence, and clarity. Okay. So now that we've talked about Yoga Nidra and cold exposure and a bit of breath work earlier, let's zoom out for a moment. What we're really doing here is learning to self-regulate. We're learning how to steer the ship of our own nervous system rather than being tossed around by stress reactivity or burnout. And here's something to think about. When you train your nervous system to handle stress, in small intentional doses, like in an ice bath or during a hard run or a tough meditation session, you become better at handling unexpected stress in the real world. That's the big picture. So don't just think of these tools as wellness hacks. Think of them as training for life. Because real resilience isn't just about powering through. It's about responding adaptively to whatever comes your way. And this leads us perfectly into part 4, where we'll explore the role of breathwork in shifting your state almost instantly. We'll talk about how to downshift anxiety, upshift focus, and why something as simple as your exhale might be the fastest way to reset your mind and body. Let's talk about something so simple it almost seems too good to be true: breathing. Now, I know everyone breathes. We don't have to think about it, right? But when you do start thinking about how you breathe, and more importantly, when and why you adjust it, you unlock a whole new level of control over your internal state. I'm not exaggerating here. Your breath is one of the fastest and most accessible tools you have for shifting your physiology and calming your mind. And it all comes down to this one basic principle. If you want to calm down, emphasize your exhale. That's it. You don't need to know complex breathing patterns or do some wild Wim Hof routine unless you enjoy that. Just focus on making your exhales longer and more intentional than your inhales. Here's the science behind it. When you exhale slowly, it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest side of your body's stress regulation. It also slows your heart rate. Your body literally interprets long exhalations as a signal that you're safe, that you're okay, that it's time to downshift. And the opposite is also true. If you want to energize yourself, emphasize your inhales. Breathing in sharply, forcefully, or deeply triggers more alertness. That's because inhales activate the sympathetic nervous system, which gears your body up for action. Your heart rate goes up, you get more focused. Your brain gets a hit of adrenaline. It's a beautifully bidirectional system. Your emotional state affects your breath, but your breath can also shape your emotional state. I'll give you an example from my own life. Sometimes when I'm overthinking at night, like I'm stuck in a loop of repetitive thoughts, I'll switch into a long exhale pattern. Nothing fancy. Just slow, gentle breathing through the mouth, making sure the exhale lasts longer than the inhale. And usually at some point, I just drift off to sleep. It's like switching off a light. Not always, of course. Sometimes my brain is stubborn, but it works way more often than you'd think. Now, what's really cool is that this isn't just anecdotal. My lab, in collaboration with Dr. David Spiegel in the Department of Psychiatry at Stanford, actually ran a clinical trial showing how specific breathing protocols can outperform meditation when it comes to calming the nervous system and improving focus. Here's the summary. Emphasize the exhale, calm and relax. Emphasize the inhale, alert and activate. And depending on your needs, whether you're trying to wind down or gear up, you can use this simple principle to steer your internal state. Now, I want to go deeper here for a second because this all ties into a broader idea: autonomic regulation. Autonomic regulation is your body's ability to shift between states like stress rest, focus, and calm without getting stuck in any one of them. It's like having a great transmission in a car. You can smoothly move between gears. When it works well, you're adaptable, resilient, and emotionally balanced. But when it doesn't, you feel overwhelmed. You snap at people. You can't focus. You're always on, or worse, you're always exhausted. And over time, that state of chronic dysregulation can lead to burnout, anxiety, and even physical illness. So when we talk about tools like cold plunges, breathwork, or Yoga Nidra, we're not just talking about self-care. We're talking about training the nervous system, building your capacity to shift gears, stay centered, and perform under pressure. And that brings me to something that's often misunderstood: hypnosis. Yep, hypnosis. Stay with me. When most people hear that word, they think of stage performers swinging watches or making people cluck like chickens. But in the clinical and neuroscience world, hypnosis is something entirely different and incredibly powerful. Think of hypnosis as a blend of calm and focus. It's not meditation. It's not breathwork. It's a distinct brain state that puts you into a zone of neuroplasticity, meaning your brain becomes highly receptive to change. Clinical hypnosis, especially the kind pioneered by Dr. David Spiegel and his father before him, has been shown to help with pain management, quitting, smoking, improving sleep, and reducing anxiety. It works by narrowing your focus in a way that bypasses some of your usual resistance. So, if you've got a specific issue you're trying to tackle, say chronic pain or a habit you want to break, hypnosis is like a fast lane to retraining your mind and body around it. Now, is hypnosis better than breathwork? Or is Yoga Nidra better than meditation? Wrong question. Each of these tools serves a different purpose. Meditation helps you explore your consciousness and train your attention. Yoga Nidra, NSDR, resets your nervous system and restores dopamine. Breathwork lets you shift your physiological state in the moment. Hypnosis creates a deep state of calm and focus for specific problem solving. You don't have to do all of them, but knowing when and why to use each one, that's the magic. That's how you start building a toolkit that actually serves your life instead of just another list of things to feel guilty about not doing. And if we zoom back out to the bigger picture, what you're really doing with all these tools is learning how to better manage your relationship with yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your energy. Because no matter what external goals you have, whether it's a niche project, you're building a new skill you're learning, or a relationship you're trying to nurture, your internal state is the foundation for everything. In Part 5, we're going to take this deeper. We'll talk about the difference between letting go and giving up, and why surrender, yes, surrender might actually be the key to unlocking more peace, more creativity, and more resilience in a chaotic world. Let's talk about something that sounds soft, but might actually be the most powerful concept of all: surrender. Now, hold on. Before your brain hits the brakes, let me clarify what I mean. I'm not talking about giving up. I'm talking about the conscious act of letting go of control, not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that control is often an illusion. Think about how many parts of life you can't control: other people's opinions, global events, even your own emotions sometimes. You can influence things, sure, you can shape your behavior, but trying to micromanage the entire universe, that's a recipe for anxiety, burnout, and emotional exhaustion. And yet, we all do it. Why? Because it feels safer to try to control everything than to sit in the uncertainty of not knowing. But here's the paradox. The greatest sense of safety often comes from releasing the need to control. It's counterintuitive, right? You'd think safety means locking things down, building routines, staying on top of everything. And yes, structure is important. Predictability is important. But at a certain point, there's a deeper kind of peace that only comes when you trust something bigger than yourself, whatever that may be. For me, personally, I believe in God. And I know everyone comes at this from different angles. You might believe in a universal force. You might believe in human connection. Or maybe your trust lives in nature, or in love, or in your own resilience. The point isn't what you trust, it's that you choose to trust at all. That choice changes everything. Because here's the truth, your nervous system feels the difference. When you're trying to control everything, your system is on high alert, hypervigilant, scanning for danger, looking for cracks, and even if there's no immediate threat, your body keeps the stress going. But when you lean into surrender, something softens, something relaxes. Your breath slows, your shoulders drop, you feel present again. You stop white-knuckling your way through the day. I'll give you an example. There's this moment a lot of people have. Maybe you've had it, where things just feel like they're falling apart. The plans you made didn't work out. The person you relied on let you down. The path you were walking suddenly disappears under your feet. And in that moment, you have two options. Double down on control, panic, scramble. Try to force the outcome. Pause and release, breathe. Acknowledge the chaos and surrender the illusion that you were ever fully in control. That second path, that's surrender. And it's not passive, it's active. It's a decision to meet uncertainty without resistance. And that takes serious inner strength. And here's the science twist. There's research happening right now, yes, even in the halls of Stanford about the inner voice, the scripts we all carry around in our heads. Some of those voices are helpful. You've got this. Others are critical. You'll never be good enough. Some sound like your parents. Some sound like old teachers' bosses, or even your past self. And those internal voices, they shape how you respond to challenge. They determine whether you hold on or let go. When I was a kid, I used to fall asleep replaying conversations I heard during the day, literally constructing imaginary dialogues in my head, complete with people's voices. I didn't know it then, but that was a form of mental rehearsal. My brain was trying to make sense of the world through story and sound. And a lot of us do something similar consciously or not. The real work begins when we start choosing which voices we listen to. When you're stressed or overwhelmed, whose voice do you hear in your head? The fearful one, the critic, or the wiser voice that says, "Let it be. You've done what you can. Now trust the process." That inner dialogue, believe it or not, is something you can train. Just like you train your body or your breath or your ability to focus. And surrender is a key part of that training. You practice surrender the same way you practice anything else in small moments. When the traffic is bad, when your plans fall through, when someone disappoints you, when you feel like things aren't moving fast enough. It's about pausing and saying, "Okay, I don't love this, but I'm going to stay open. I'm not going to fight reality." And the cool part, this kind of surrender makes you more effective, not less. Because when you're not stuck in resistance, your brain can actually think clearly. You have access to problem-solving, creativity, even humor. You become more emotionally intelligent. You see the bigger picture. And maybe most importantly, you become more resilient. You stop wasting energy on things you can't change, and you start investing that energy into what you can influence. That's what we call adaptive cognition. And it's one of the most valuable skills you can build. Now, this doesn't mean becoming numb. It doesn't mean tolerating injustice or abuse. Surrender isn't about apathy. It's about staying soft without collapsing. It's about keeping your heart open even when things are hard. That's the paradox. The softer you are, the stronger you become. So let me ask you a simple question. When was the last time you surrendered, really surrendered, not out of defeat, but out of trust? If it's been a while, that's okay. This isn't a one-time thing. It's a practice, a moment-by-moment invitation to let go of what you can't control and lean into the wisdom of your own nervous system, your breath, your body, your life. In Part 6, we're going to bridge everything we've talked about so far: cold exposure, breathwork, meditation, yoga nidra, and surrender, and look at how it all fits into your daily rhythm. Specifically, we'll dive into the science of ultradian rhythms and how you can use these natural 90-minute cycles to unlock more focus, better learning, and deeper flow. So far, we've talked about a lot: resilience, breathwork, cold, plunges, yoga nidra, even surrender. Now let's pull all of that into a daily rhythm you can actually live with. Because real transformation doesn't happen in one big leap. It happens in cycles, and that's where ultradian rhythms come in. Now, don't let the word throw you off. Ultradian just means more frequent than once a day. And in this case, we're talking about the brain's natural 90-minute cycles of alertness, energy, and focus. These are happening all the time in both your waking and sleeping hours. You don't even have to believe in them. They're baked into your biology. So, what does this mean for your day? It means that you already have natural Windows 90-minute blocks when your brain is primed to focus deeply, solve hard problems, and make meaningful progress. The key is learning to recognize them and use them. Let me give you an example. Say you wake up at 7:00 a.m. For the first hour, you're still coming online. Cortisol, your natural wake-up hormone, is rising. Maybe you drink water, get sunlight in your eyes, as I always recommend, move a little bit. But by around 9:00 or 9:30, your brain starts hitting that first real focus gear. That's your first ultradian work block. This is the time to lean into your most cognitively demanding work, writing, learning, problem-solving strategy, whatever your hard thing is. You've got about 90 minutes to ride that wave. Now here's the truth. Not all 90 minutes are created equal. Even within that block, most people only get about 60 minutes of deep, uninterrupted focus. The first 10-15 minutes, that's warm-up. You're still settling in. There'll be moments when your mind drifts totally normal. Just refocus and keep going. And after that hour, let it taper off. Move, stretch, take a short break, do something light. Then, sometime in the early to mid-afternoon, maybe around 1:32, 00, or 3:00, you'll likely get another wave. This is your second ultradian cycle. It's another chance to get focused work done. Some people even squeeze in a third early in the morning if they're early risers and their cortisol hits hard right after waking. But for most people, 2 is the sweet spot. You might be wondering, how do I find my exact rhythm? Simple: pay attention. For a few days, just notice when you feel naturally alert and mentally clear. No caffeine tricks, no energy drinks, just honest self-observation. When does your brain switch on? That's your rhythm. Because here's the kicker: the brain chemicals that drive learning, like dopamine and BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, peak during these ultradian cycles. So if you time your learning, skill building, or creative work to those windows, you're not just working smarter, you're literally training your brain more effectively. Think about it like surfing. You could paddle for hours in flat water and get nowhere, or you could learn to ride the wave that's already coming and get where you're going with way less effort. And this rhythm doesn't just apply to cognitive tasks. It applies to physical learning too. Trying to improve a movement pattern, learn a dance step, practice an instrument, use your ultradian window. Focused effort during those cycles equals faster neuroplasticity. Now, let me be clear. This isn't about cramming your day full of productive blocks. It's about being strategic. You might only get 2 good ultradian cycles in a day. That's normal. Maybe you use the first one for writing or problem solving. You use the second one for creative thinking or planning, and then the rest of the day, use it for everything else: meetings, errands, conversations, exercise, even rest. The real win is knowing when to push and when to pause. And speaking of pausing, this is where non-sleep deep rest NSDR comes back into play. A 10-30-minute NSDR session right after an ultradian block doesn't just help you recover. It can actually help lock in the learning from that session. You see, the actual rewiring of your brain, the synaptic changes that solidify learning, don't happen during the focus block. They happen after, during rest. That's why things like Yoga Nidra naps or even a quiet walk can be so valuable. They give your nervous system the space it needs to integrate what you just learned or practiced. Without that recovery, it's like pouring water into a full cup. It just spills over. You lose retention, clarity, energy. But when you cycle between deep focus and real recovery, your brain becomes a machine for learning. And this whole model, the ultradian rhythm method, isn't just for work or study. It's how you can structure a day that feels natural, not forced. It's how you align with your biology instead of fighting it. Let me summarize how to put this into action. Track your alertness. When do you feel most focused? That's your ultradian rhythm surf spot. Schedule deep work during that time, 1 or 2 90-minute blocks per day. Expect 60 good minutes of focus within that 90. The rest is warm up and wind down. Recover afterwards, a short NSDR session, breathwork, a walk. Anything that downshifts your system. Repeat, don't cram. Don't expect to live in peak focus all day. 2 solid blocks are more than enough. In Part 7, we'll get into how these rhythms tie into something even more foundational: safety and acceptance. I'll show you how everything from your breath to your sleep to your creative focus ultimately connects back to this core human need, and why tending to it might unlock the peace, presence, and purpose you've been chasing for years. Let's take everything we've talked about so far: cold exposure, Yoga Nidra, breathwork, ultradian rhythms, and zoom out for a second. Because underneath all of these tools, techniques, and practices, there's something deeper we're really chasing. It's not just focus, it's not just energy, it's not even resilience. It's safety. That might sound surprising, but it's true. At the core of every decision you make, every habit you struggle with, and every feeling you can't shake, there's usually some question of, am I safe? Am I safe to speak my truth? Am I safe to rest? Am I safe to take a risk or to let go? And when we talk about safety here, we're not just talking about physical safety. We're talking about nervous system safety, the kind of internal sense that says, I know where I am. I know what's going on. I know what to expect. Your brain craves that predictability. It thrives on structure. That's why dogs sniff out corners of a new room. It's why kids ask the same bedtime questions every night. And it's why you feel better when your routines are intact, even if you've never thought about it that way. You can feel it, right? That grounding you get from knowing where you're going to sleep tonight, from knowing what time lunch is, from knowing who you're going to see. That's not just comfort, it's the foundation of your mental bandwidth. When those basics are in place, your brain doesn't have to keep asking, "Am I okay?" It can start asking, "What do I want to create? Who do I want to connect with? How can I grow?" But when you don't feel safe, when things feel uncertain or chaotic, your mental energy gets eaten alive. Your attention collapses. Your emotions start running the show. And instead of being curious, you become reactive. So when we talk about building daily routines or tapping into ultradian rhythms or getting sunlight in the morning, it's not about optimization for optimization's sake. It's about building islands of safety in your day. Little anchors that say, "Hey, nervous system, you're okay. You can settle now." Now, I want to say something really important here. Safety isn't the absence of stress. It's the presence of predictable recovery. Life will still be chaotic sometimes. You'll still face pressure, heartbreak, tough decisions. But if your system knows that you've got reliable ways to come back down, whether it's a breath practice, a walk, a nap, a conversation, or a few minutes of Yoga Nidra, then you won't get stuck in that high alert state. You'll have a path home. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Once you've got that internal safety, something beautiful starts to grow: acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean you approve of everything. It doesn't mean you agree with the pain, the unfairness, the confusion. But it means you stop fighting reality and you start responding to it from a grounded place. When you accept what is, you free yourself to decide what next. And this matters because a lot of people stay stuck in anxiety loops not because they're broken, but because their nervous systems never got the message that the danger has passed. They never got the update, "You're okay now, you can soften." So they keep bracing, keep scanning, keep replaying. But once you build just a little more capacity to regulate, to breathe through discomfort, to rest on purpose, to ride the wave instead of fight it, you start to shift. You start to move from survival mode to creative mode, from fear to purpose, from exhaustion to clarity. And that shift, it changes how you show up in every part of your life. You stop needing perfection because safety gives you permission to be human. You stop avoiding hard conversations because safety gives you the capacity to stay regulated while you're uncomfortable. You stop overplanning every second because safety gives you the courage to respond instead of trying to control. All of this creates space for what you actually want: connection, joy, focus, presence, creativity. You know, the good stuff. So here's a reflection I want to offer. What parts of your life are you trying to control, not because they're urgent, but because your system doesn't feel safe? Where might your overthinking, your overwhelm, your endless busyness be signs that your nervous system is asking for grounding, not just productivity? That's not a flaw. It's a signal, and you can work with that signal. Because here's the good news. Safety can be trained with breathwork, with rest, with cold exposure, with daily rhythms, with surrender, with honest conversations, with small acts of self-trust. You don't have to control everything. You just need a reliable path back to yourself, back to calm, back to center. And the more often you walk that path, the faster it appears the next time you need it. In Part 8, the final section, we're going to tie everything together. I'll walk you through how to build a simple, sustainable daily system that incorporates these tools without burning out, overcommitting, or getting stuck in perfectionism. Just practical steps to help you live with more clarity energy, and peace.